Hi guys, it's Mark here from SeaWild Earth, and I'm here again with another quick tutorial. Probably be the last one I'm going to do for the Moondog Labs because I've done a few now, and I think the everything's covered by the tutorials that I've done to date. The reason why I'm going to do this last one is because I'm shooting with a new iPhone 6s Plus. And I just wanted to quickly reiterate and go through the workflow with using that and the Anamorphic Moondog Labs, but I also wanted to render out a final time-lapse file using the very extreme aspect ratio of 239:1, and you'll see what I mean by that as we go through the tutorial. Okay, so here we are. This is my phone, and I'm going to be using. I was out shooting the app called Lapse, which you can see just down here. I'm going to go into that, and you're going to see from there. We can go to the home straight away. Options for new capture gallery and settings. I've already shot the time lapse, so I'm going to go into gallery. Okay, and that's going to bring up the two files that I've done. The two shoots that I've done. It's got one which is rendered and one which is not published. Okay, there's the same file, but one's been published, one hasn't. One's been rendered and it hasn't been published. Now, this is the time lapse that I'm interested in, and what I want to do, what's going to make life a lot easier, is for me to, if I access this bottom one, you can see, no, not that one, sorry. One that's been rendered. By accessing that, I have the option here to zip it to iTunes. Now this app can, let's just get rid of that, this app can give me the time-lapse as I've shot it. It's been rendered. What I can do, I can watch it and it's going to show me the time-lapse as in the screen as it's been rendered by the app. Now this would be okay if I wasn't using the Moondog Labs 1.33 times anamorphic because it needs to be desqueezed. It's still very square. It looks all pretty much blocked up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the whole system where I'm going to have complete manual access over each one of the images and be able to edit it exactly how I want it. Okay, so without further ado, what I can do, using this feature here, zip to iTunes, it will send, and I'll do that, and it's going to give me a little dialog box there. It can take a while, so we press continue, and what's going to happen now is that is going to send a zip file to my iTunes. Now, you know, in the bottom of iTunes, and we'll see it in a short while, in the bottom of your iTunes where the apps are listed, it will give you files that belong to apps that have the permission to write to iTunes. Okay, and that's what we're going to look at once this has finished rendering. So we come out of the app and I'm going to go quickly to my iTunes. We'll go to phone and we'll list the apps that I've got. Now here you'll notice at the bottom of the app listings you've got all of the apps shown that have the permission to write to iTunes. Okay, and if we look under Lapse It there, here you will find the first one. This is the one where I'm concerned with now. This is the file, the zip file that was created by the command in the app to zip to iTunes. Okay, you'll notice this one was done yesterday. It's because of a different time lapse that I shot yesterday. This one was for the one that we've just done with the app that I showed you. Okay, now in order to unzip and get access to those images, we have to save to. I'm going to go to desktop and I'm going to create a new folder. Okay, and we'll call that just Waterfront, yeah, or Yokohama Bay. How's that? Because that's where it was. Yokohama Bay. Create and save to. Now it's going to take a bit of a while because there is 1,120 odd, or 1,000, almost 1,200 pictures, and I will explain a little bit why once we have the images. And you can see that here's your progress bar here. It's copying. It's going to start copying the files, and we'll pick that up from the file when it has finished. The zip has been sent. Here is the file, the folder that we created, Yokohama Bay. Inside you will find that the zip is there. So let's go ahead and double click that and unzip it. And what should happen is we should have another folder appear called Yokohama Bay, and that will then contain all of the zip, all of the individual frames, of which there's about nearly 1,200 inside that relate to the time lapse that we shot this morning, from the time lapse that was shot yesterday, but we created the zip this morning. So we'll just wait for this to open. Now sometimes I notice with this app, I've used it a couple of times now, that the last couple of images that you shoot in the time lapse tend to be corrupt. No easy way of putting it. So what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll have a look right now. But each time that I've shot a time lapse, I've found at the wrong point of editing that the two last images generally tend to be screwed. So bear that in mind. I'm just going to check and see if that is the case again with this time lapse once we've got access to the files, which should be any time now. There we go. Here's all the files, and here we go. This is the view that we had, and the area that I was shooting was out across Yokohama Bay. And what you'll notice with the composition, because I'm going to be trying to edit and adopting that very extreme letterboxing aspect ratio of 239:1, is my composition has left a lot of space at the top and at the bottom, dead space, because most of this is going to be cropped out anyway. But anyway, let's just quickly go down and have a look at the last two. There you go. That's not good, and that's not good. If you have a look at all of these images, 149 kilobits size wise down here, compared to all of the others from the app are 2.6 megabytes. Okay, so these last two, I'm going to get rid of them. Just drag and drop into the trash. There we go. Okay, so now we can work with that. So this is now where the fun begins. Now, because I was shooting with the Moondog Labs, if you watch my last tutorial about this lens, you'll realize that we are missing out on the benefits of shooting with the lens if we keep this image, because it is still unsqueezed. It needs to be de-squeezed. It's still squeezed because it was shot by the app and by that lens. So we're going to go into Photoshop, we're going to create an action, and I'm going to show you how to automatically resize all of these images without it being too much of a chore to the user. Alright, so next stop, Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop, and what you need in Photoshop is you need to have this pane open here, which is your actions. If you don't see that, or if it doesn't figure in your toolbar, simply go to Windows at the top here and click Actions. There you go, and that bar there will pop out. Okay, now I'm going to quickly open the first frame that we have in the Yokohama Bay folder that we just created in order to get the first image. Now you'll see that this image is the same resolution as you would find in your regular iPhone shots, okay, but the fact is that we used an anamorphic lens on this, which means that the image should be bigger, should be wider, okay, by 1.33 times, which was the characteristic of the anamorphic lens. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to need to adjust the size of this image, but because we're going to adjust the size of this image, and this relates to every image in the time lapse, we're then going to have to we're going to have to create and make that same adjustment to 1200 images. Now that in itself is going to be one heck of a task if we decided to do that manually, okay, which we're not going to. I'm going to show you how we can automate that complete process. Right, bearing in mind that you have to start already with one image open, your first image, which is now open. I'm going to create what is called an action, and an action is a series of actions that you go through in order to create an effect, to do a task such as resizing, etc., etc. But then that task can be allocated to a batch process in order to facilitate and make a lot easier that action over a vast number of files. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Down here in this bottom part of this is your actions pane here. So down here in your actions, okay, you have these two folders. Okay, one is called create a new set, which is the first one. So we're going to click on that and we're going to call this set resize. Okay, here you can see up here resize has been created. Now within resize we're going to create an action. Now the name of the action, let's call it DeSqueeze or Moondog DeSqueeze. How's that? So we can't get lost. DeSqueeze. Okay, and it's in the set resize. Okay, we hit record, and you'll notice here now that this little red button here down there to show that we're recording is lit red. So now every action that we do on this image is going to be recorded. Okay, and you can see where I'm going with this. I'm going to go through the process now of resizing this. I'll close the image and then I'll apply it to a batch. Very, very simple. Okay, so here we go. So first off, let's have a look at the image size. Because we need to adjust this. Okay, when you first open it, you'll see that the constrained proportions is ticked. We're going to untick it. Why? Because we need to make an adjustment only on one of the planes, and that is the horizontal plane across. We need to augment the size of the image so as to get the full benefit of using that 1.33 times anamorphic. And the way that we do that, very simply, is to find out how we need to resize it. We multiply the width of the image, okay, which is currently at 4032 pixels, 4032 pixels, and we multiply that by the characteristic of the anamorphic lens, which is 1.33. That gives us a reading of 5362.56. Okay, I'm going to discard the 0.56 and I'm going to readjust this top parameter to 5362. Okay, press OK, and there you go. That now is the size of the image that we have to play with that we shot using the anamorphic lens. Okay, now what I need to do is I need to file, save as. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I've got a time-lapse drive here. I'm going to go to that time-lapse drive and I'm going to create another folder. I'm saving this image into this drive and I'm going to call it waterfront sequence. Okay, create. There's waterfront sequence, it's in there, 001, save. It's a large file, 6.9 meg, okay, press OK with that. And then we're going to file and we're going to close. Now that is the end of the action. So we go down here and we press stop. Here now is the action that we've got. Okay, if we now want to automate that complete process, this is what we do. We go to File, Automate, Batch. Okay, up here we've got the set, so we'll look for the set and we'll find our resize. There it is. And the action inside that set is called Moondog DeSqueeze. It's the only one that we created. Our source is a folder, so we'll go ahead and we'll find that, which is the folder that's on our desktop, Yokohama Bay, and it's that one there with all of the images in from the zip. So we choose that our destination folder, again, we'll choose that is in the time-lapse drive, waterfront sequence that we just created, and we choose that. Okay, now this is all we need to do. So if we go OK, what's going to happen now is every image in our source file is going to be opened, it's going to be resized, and it's going to be saved into the destination folder. Now, how simple is that? Once this process finishes, I then have access to all of the images at the size I need without having to worry about, oh, did I resize this? Did I resize that? One or the other. Okay, so this is obviously a process that's going to take quite a while. There's 1,200 images to do in total. So we're going to pick this up when we've finished the full resize automation and we're ready to go into the time-lapse main editing. I'm now going to be using a couple of, to edit my photos, I'm going to be using Adobe Lightroom, that's this one here, and my time-lapse editing is going to be, or the keyframing and preparation is going to be done in LRTimelapse Pro. That's this board that I've got open here, this software I've got open here. Now I've already done one first objective, and that's because it is quite time consuming. Down here on the left hand side you can see that my you can see this is my directory here, my root directory, and here is the folder selected for the waterfront sequence. Okay, 1,191 images. That's this image up here, and here in the main screen, okay, this main area here, you've got all of the images listed from 1 all the way through to 1191. Okay, and they've now been indexed by this software. They've all been laid out on this timeline where you've got the median exposure line marked by this yellow white line here. You can see that I've shot slightly over, okay, that is through the iPhone. I slightly over exposed, which is great because it keeps all of the detail in the highlights. And so without much further ado, we'll go through the workflow, which is also highlighted in a few other of my tutorials. Starting at the top here with LRTimelapse, you work simply from the first button and you go left. You work to the right. Okay, so up here we've got Keyframe Wizard. This basically is going to work out or allow me to decide how many keyframes I want to have in order to edit this piece. Now, because this is a constant lighting scenario, there's not a lot of flicker going on, there's not a lot of iris changes, well, there aren't any iris changes or shutter speed changes. So I'm only actually going to need two keyframes, and here they are here. I can decide how many I want. I can just by dragging and increasing or decreasing that number, and you can see on the timeline that those parameters change as I drag. So if I drag it here to 4, you'll see these little blue indicators here, which are your indicators for keyframes. They will change depending on what you decide to add here. Okay, now I only want 2 keyframes, so that's going to select the first frame and the last frame of the sequence, and you can double check that in the main frame here because you've got your blue indicator here. You can unclick that and you can see it's unclicked here, or you can reselect it and it will reselect there. Okay, so there's my first keyframe, which is the first frame of my time lapse, and my second keyframe down the bottom here, okay, that is my last frame, this one here on the timeline. Okay, that's all very simple. All I need to do after that, I'll just close that down and save that information so that when we drag that then through to Lightroom eventually, it will know that those 2 images are the keyframes that I'm going to use to edit the aesthetic of the time lapse. Okay, now this is going to take a short while, so I'll come back when this is rendered and we're ready to go. Okay, so we're just coming up to the end of this saving process, the first saving process in LRTimelapse Pro. Once this progress bar is done, There you go. Okay, now the next button, it says quite simply, if we hover over any one of these buttons, it will come up with a prompt as to what's going to happen with that button when we click it. And with this one, it just says drag it to Lightroom. So we're going to make sure that in Lightroom we're in the main panel, display panel. Let's go back to LRTimelapse. We just grab a hold of this button and we drag it, we click it and we drag it into the main frame, into the main panel, main pane, and then it will go into the import procedure for Adobe Lightroom. We edit, select all and tell it to import. There we go, and now it's going to go through, and you can notice there on the first frame that there's 4 stars associated with that frame, and that is the indicator that this is in fact a keyframe that has been brought through from LRTimelapse Pro. So once the whole sequence is loaded, you can see the progress bar of the loading up here. Both this first button, or this first image, and the last image will have these 4-star attributes to show us that they are the keyframes that we will edit in order to get the aesthetic for the time-lapse, for the final look of the time-lapse. Okay, so we'll just wait for that to load. And what you do have down here, bottom right, is you have your filters that you can drop that down. If I only want to see the keyframes, which I do, I will select that and it will show me just the keyframes. The first one's here, the second one hasn't loaded yet. Once it's loaded, it will pop up next door to it, right there. Okay, need a bit of processing time. Come on. Anyway, here's our first image. We're going to go then to, this is the image that we have. We're then going to go to the develop pane. I'm going to drop down get rid of these sideboards so that we have all of the real estate. Now this is the frame, the first frame of the time lapse. This is our first keyframe. I'm going to go here to edit. Now the first thing that I want to do is I want to get that let's get rid of that. I want to get the crop. I want to make this into the extreme letterbox crop, which is an aspect ratio of 2.39 to 1. Okay, now in order to get that, we go to the crop. Okay, and on your original, it's got your different aspect ratios here that you can crop to, which are defaults. Okay, 239 to 1 is here at the bottom. If we click that, there you go, and you can see straight away we've got the borders set up for our 239 to 1 scene. This is going to be the crop, so I'm happy with that. Let's put the on the 2/3 line, the top of the building on the 2/3 rule of thirds, and press that again. There we go. That's going to be our crop, and that is going to be the aspect ratio of the final video. Although for this tutorial, unfortunately it's going to have to fit with black lines above and below to fit the aspect ratio of the remainder of the tutorial. But what I will do is I'll create a secondary standalone file of this time-lapse sequence alone in the wide letterbox format and link to that in the tutorial text, so you will be able to see the final outcome of this aspect ratio just by linking to another video at the end of this. Okay, now if I want that to go through to my next, if I want to carry that over to my last keyframe, obviously I want to keep the same crop. Up here we just go settings, copy settings. Okay, now sometimes you'll have everything ticked like this, but we're going to uncheck nothing. We're going to just go into the calibration and the crop selections. We're going to copy those. We're going to arrow over to our right to get our second keyframe, and then settings, paste settings. There you go, and there is now the crop carried over from our first keyframe. So we can go back to our first keyframe, there it is, and from here we can then start to edit and get the aesthetic that we want for the look of the time-lapse. Okay, so I'm going to quickly do that, and when I'm done that, I'm going to come back and we'll pick it up from there. This is the first keyframe, and this is how I've decided to edit it. Okay, I've used a preset here, and I've just adjusted some of those parameters on the preset. I kind of like this. I think it looks quite funky. I'm going to hide this control panel here just to get this not as big as we can get it. Okay, like I said, I'm happy with that. So from here, what I need to do is I need to go back to library. Okay, we're in library, and then if I command click the second keyframe, and up here in the top of the frame, up top of the screen, sorry, I've got this little script, and it's got LRTimelapse sync keyframes. It's a script. By clicking that, all I'm going to do then is I'm going to carry over all of the edits that I have made in the first keyframe and carry that through to the second keyframe. There's our second keyframe. There's our first keyframe. Now you'll notice here, I'm going to make a few changes here. You'll notice here that because the day did change, the position of the sun changed. So if you have a look at this screen here, or this side of the building here, you can see here it's nice and light. On the second keyframe, it's a bit darker. Okay, excuse me, it's a bit darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust the shadows a little bit, just to bring back a little bit of the lightness. And then you can always toggle between the keyframes, and that'll give you an idea. And this second one, I'm thinking, that's the first one, that's the second one. Maybe we can just give it a smudge on the exposure, and let's see if, yeah, there's hardly any jump there. There's a little bit, but then I think that that's just relative to the fact that the sun is shining on these surfaces, and whereas in the second keyframe it isn't. Okay, there's your first one, there's your second one, there's your first one, there's your second one. And also it gives it the illusion that the position's changed, but it hasn't. It's just relative to the shadow shift. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let's get this. We don't need to have it back, but I'm going to put it back. Okay, we'll come back to library. We're in library, and we'll go to multiple image view mode, and then we select everything. Okay, so we select both of these. Sorry, edit, select all. Let's go select all, do it that way. And here on metadata, because we've made changes, we need to save that metadata back to the files. And now what that is doing up here, it's saving all of the information that we've loaded into these images, that is the crop and all of the aesthetic changes that we've made. I then, just as a personal thing, go back to full sequence before going back to LRTimelapse. Okay, and then with LRTimelapse, very simple process from here on in. We've just done this edit up here, edited to keyframes. So now we come back to the left, we reload. Okay, and that's now is going to reload all of the complete sequences. And this next command, auto transition, what this does, all we do is click, but what the software is doing, by doing that, you'll see the progress bar up here. What it's doing, it's reading the changes that we've made in the first keyframe and in the last keyframe. Okay, and what it's now going to do is it's working out the transition. You can see here the crop of the image. What it's going to do now is it's working out the incremental changes that need to be made for every individual frame between the first keyframe and the second keyframe, in order for them to accomplish that smooth transition of looks between point A and point B. Point A being keyframe 1, point B being keyframe 2. Okay, and because there's not that much of a transition, it's a relatively straightforward adjustment for the images. Now, if this was a day to night, transition or a holy grail technique, then obviously that change is more noted per frame, because you've got all of the light changes, maybe the iris changes, the shutter speed and everything else. This is a constant that was shot at about 11 o'clock in the morning, so not a lot changes in there. Okay, so all it's programming really are the aesthetic changes that we made with the edits between keyframe 1 and 2. Okay, here the next command is deflicker. Just in case there is a little bit of flicker with the image remaining. We're on a fixed shutter with this, and fixed shutter and a fixed iris with the iPhone. I just like to iron it out in case there are some little fluctuations in any camera lens. I normally put it on 30, press apply, and then that is going to, when I press save now, that then is going to add those calculations into those individual frames. Okay, you can see the progress bar at the top here. Okay, and then once that's done, we're pretty much done with LRTimelapse. Okay, so once this is done, this progress bar, we then go back into Adobe Lightroom, and that's where we're going to pick it up once this is reloaded. Okay, well, the images have now loaded, or the changes have been loaded into Adobe Lightroom. You'll notice here on the first frame that we've got the crop of the first keyframe here, but all of the subsequent images they are not cropped at this point in time. Okay, now what we need to do, because we've made all of those, well, we've made those adjustment changes with LRTimelapse Pro with regards to the auto transition and the deflicker. There's metadata in these images that needs to be reread in order for them to adopt both the aesthetic of the keyframes, between the keyframes, and the changes that have been coded into the images to accommodate their edit and their transition. Okay, and the way that we do that, quite simply, is that we will go edit, select all, you see all the images highlighted, and then metadata, read metadata from files. Okay, and what you'll notice here straight away, boom, images are starting to take on the aesthetic of the keyframe. Okay, they're reading all of that incremental metadata that was processed into the images in LRTimelapse Pro when we click that transition, that auto transition. Okay, so we have to wait for this progress bar to get through to show that all images have been read, all the metadata has been changed, and from there it's just a matter then of sending all of these keyframes to be rendered as frames, which LRTimelapse will then finally use in order to create that final look, that final sequence. Okay, so once this is done, I will show you how to export and get ready for creating mad videos. I gotta say, this aspect ratio does look pretty damn sexy. I love it. But this is what it's all about. It's all about learning, it's all about pushing envelopes, and it's all about doing whatever you can do with whatever camera you've got. Because there's magic in every sensor. Okay, well there you go, look, all of the images have loaded. Okay, what I'm going to do now, just very quickly, I'm going to go to this and I'm going to say, go to folder in library. I just prefer to work this way. Here's all of my images. Before I export everything, let me just edit, select all again, make sure everything is selected. Okay, and then from file we're going to export, but we're going to export using the LRTimelapse Pro plugin, which is here, and you've got your different options. You've got you can have each frame as a JPEG 4K resolution. You can go as a JPEG but with original resolution. You can go JPEG 8-bit TIFF, or you can go, sorry, TIFF, 8-bit TIFF or 16-bit TIFF. For the sake of quality, I'm going to go with 16 bits. So let's plug that in there, which basically means this is going to be one hell of a huge file for a 23-second video time-lapse. I'm going to choose a folder to write this to, and I'm going to create a fresh folder. Pictures. Let's create a time-lapse transport. That's a time-lapse transport folder. There we go. Waterfront sequence. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, and we press export. And now Adobe Lightroom is going to evaluate all of these images. There you go, preparing for export. And this is going to be another humongously long process, so we're going to leave you once I explain what's going to happen here. It's just preparing all of the images for export as 16-bit TIFFs, and you'll see up here once this is done, there's 1,191 images to go. LRTimelapse is just checking the full sequence, and there you go. From there, it's going to export 1,191 images. So I'm going to leave it here, and I will catch up with you when they're done. Okay, so here we are. We're just about to come up to the end of the render of the exporting of the complete component frames, individual frames for the time lapse. You'll see here 1189. We've got one more to go after this. These are all 16-bit TIFFs, so they're going to weigh in quite a bit, but we're not going to lose any quality whatsoever. Okay, what's going to happen in a minute? There we go. We automatically get flipped back to LRTimelapse Pro, and your attention is drawn to this panel that we've got here. This is our export dialog. Okay, you can see at the top it's going to render this sequence that was just created by Adobe Lightroom. Okay, and the output file is going to create its own output file here. And that is because, and you'll see that in a minute how that changes. Down here we've got the codec, you've got Mpeg 4, ProRes or H.265, an experimental codec. If you wanted to then have a 720p, 1080p, 3K, 4K, 5, 6 or even 8K version, you select that here on your output size. If, say for example, I wanted 4K, you'll notice up here that the file name changes to reflect the format that I want. Okay, but I'm going to keep the source resolution, and so there you can see ORI-Res or original resolution. Okay, at the moment I've got frame rate 30. It's actually going to be 48. I filmed it calculating for 48, and the reason I've done that is because I wanted more frames in the second to avoid any additional stutter that may have come from the not having direct access to the shutter speed. Okay, speed is 1:1. Quality down here, ultra high. Color sampling 444. Post-processing, I don't put any color, any motion blur on it, and I don't add any additional sharpening. I think it's sharp enough with with how we treated it with Lightroom, and I'm not going to put any copyright overlay on it at all. Okay, so all I need to do is down here in the lower right hand, render video. That then is going to go to my render, and down here in the bottom left, you will see starting in a minute there is a blue progress line as it goes through and starts rendering each of my frames. You can see it counting through there, frame 4, 5, 6. Bearing in mind we've got 1,200 frames to go. So I'm going to let this run. We're not going to sit here for that whole time. And once we're done, I'm then going to be going into how I take the original size resolution file down to a resolution where we can use it in our videos and also watch it on the screen. This is an old iMac I've got, so it doesn't really watch 4K, and bearing in mind that this one that we're pumping out now is going to be closer to 5K. Okay, but I'll show you all that when we're done, so I'll catch up with you in a short while. Okay, well we finished rendering now with LRTimelapse Pro. You can see the progress bar is now finished, so I'm going to come out of here. We don't need this anymore, so come out of LRTimelapse Pro. I'm also going to close down Lightroom because we don't need that anymore either. And then I'm going to be playing around with a small program that I use for all of my video conversions. It's called, where is it? Mpeg StreamClip. There it is right there. And let's open this guy up. Okie dokie. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the master file, which is actually a 5K resolution file of the sequence that we've just created. Okay, this is the full 5K resolution sequence that I've just created. I'm not even going to try and play it on this computer because it won't play, but it's great to have the master. But what I'm going to do from here, I'm going to create a lesser version which should play, and it will be the version that I'm going to put online. Okay, so I'm going to go for YouTube and Vimeo encoding is Mpeg 4. Okay, H.264 for limit the data rate is going to be what is it, 30,000 kbps. Okay, there's no sound. Okay, now my resolution, okay, you've got all of your presets here for different resolutions, but because I'm using this particular aspect ratio, my resolution is going to be a little bit different. And my 16:9 resolution for 2K is 2048 by, what is it, 858. 858. That gives us this really nice super wide letterboxed anamorphic feel. We're going to de-interlace, and I'm going to keep the 48. And we are going to make an Mpeg 4 file of that, and we're just going to put the master of that on the waterfront sequence. What do you say? 2K at 48. So 2K 48. Happy with that. There we go, and then we'll save, and then we're going to see up here. We will get the encoding information. Here we go, the percentage wise of slowly progressing through. So here we are, we're just coming up to the end of the render. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly close this bad boy on QuickTime. So file, let's open a file and let's see. Do it this way, I guess. We'll open up this is the 2K but Mpeg 4 version, so it should play nicely, and this, after all of our hard work, is the result. Should we go to full view? Let's have a look. Enter full screen. I reckon this will look pretty damn sexy. There we go. Shot on an iPhone 6. I think that's pretty awesome, and it's certainly worth the added work, you know. I really think it is. It looks superb. Isn't it just awesome? Time lapse. Wow. Ching ching ching. So cool. Right, let's go out there. Let's have a little bit smaller. See if it have another run through. Wow. This is just awesome, isn't it? That is so cool to think you can do that on a camera that you have hidden in your pocket most of the day. It's pretty damn cool. And it serves a niche. It serves a purpose, and it serves a market. Cool beans. Alright, well, I'm going to take this into Final Cut Pro, and I'm going to finish off this tutorial. So all that remains is for me to say thank you for watching this this tutorial. I hope you've learned something, and I've just been joined in my studio by my little boy, who wants to say thank you. Joshy, say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, just said goodbye. Okay, guys, cheers for that. See you soon.